It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The first ray of hope in the Middle East conflict, the ceasefire welcomed by hundreds of thousands across Lebanon and the head of the UN. That hope, though, still feels far from the streets of Gaza. But even there, we hear how people dream of having the same. Also tonight, changing his mind over assisted dying. The former Prime Minister, David Cameron, says he is now in favour of the latest bill. The threats targeting the team around Donald Trump as the FBI investigates attempts at so-called swatting attacks. Believe in more babies. We hear what might have motivated Donald Trump's ally, Elon Musk, in his push to get more people parenting. Another famous night under the Anfield lights as Liverpool beat Real Madrid in the Champions League. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. There was a reminder tonight to more than 1 million people displaced in Lebanon that the return to their homes after the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah may not be straightforward. As thousands of them were embarking on the journey back towards the south of their country, Israel announced a curfew with little warning that would last until tomorrow morning. The scramble home in Lebanon was in contrast to the quiet that we saw in Israel, where one of the few people we could find still remaining near the border told us many of his neighbours aren't yet ready to return. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports now from the region.
Just hours after the ceasefire began in Lebanon and the displaced had taken to the roads with their possessions to head back to their villages in the south of the country. But despite the jubilation, much has been destroyed and it will take years to rebuild.
We left our house 63 days ago, almost in the first days that Dahya started getting bombarded. It was very hard on us. It's not easy at all.
The house has been damaged. We will go back and fix it, and we are used to this. We lost our house in the village down south, and now here.
The Israeli military struck targets right up to the moment in the early hours of the morning when the ceasefire took hold. Acrid smoke from the blasts still hung over the capital, Beirut. Lebanon's caretaker government is hoping the truce can be maintained. The nation's army will be deployed to the south to keep the peace.
Today is a new day where we hope it carries with it peace and stability. On this day, the 1,000-mile journey begins in rebuilding what was destroyed and completing the strengthening of the role of legitimate institutions.
Across the border in northern Israel, there is unease and questions over whether the agreement will hold. It is very, very quiet after months of fighting. There's no sound of artillery or rocket fire, but these places are still pretty much deserted. Most people still staying away. There's a great deal of apprehension about what comes next. You're very close here indeed.
Extremely close. If you actually look through the trees, you can see a Lebanese village there.
Barry Prague, a resident of Kibbutz Daphna, says many of his neighbours are still too worried to return.
We've got a new area development there. People have bought houses and they said, wait, are we so close to the border? Because we've had 15 years of quiet. And now we had a war, which is the worst war we've ever had.
Under the deal, Hezbollah will move its heavy weapons north of the Litani River, whilst Israeli troops will withdraw from southern Lebanon entirely. But Israel is making clear it reserves the right to attack if there are breaches to the agreement. The accord does nothing, though, to stop the fighting in Gaza, where there's been no let-up in the violence. The people here feel abandoned.
Of course, news of the ceasefire in Lebanon is positive, for its people and for the government. And the people of Gaza dream of having the same, because they too deserve to experience that.
The truce between Israel and Hezbollah remains delicate. There is much that could still go wrong. The hope is that the initial 60-day ceasefire will be extended and will eventually lead to a broader regional peace. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Northern Israel.
Well, the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah is in part being overseen by the United States. And today, the Biden administration pushed back at claims from a member of Donald Trump's team that the imminent arrival of the incoming president had helped make the deal. The damage the war has left in Lebanon, though, is vast, with nearly £7 billion of reconstruction needed, as our international affairs editor Dominic Wycorn explains.
Hezbollah and Israel have been at war since Hezbollah attacked Israel the day after October the 7th. Israel invaded southern Lebanon on the 1st of October this year. By Tuesday this week, Israeli troops had reached all the way to the Litani River for the first time since hostilities began. They've now agreed a ceasefire. Under its terms, over the next 60 days, Israeli forces should fully withdraw from southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah must move what remains of its forces north of the Litani River. Then Lebanese forces, 5,000 troops, will move in to ensure Hezbollah stays out of the area between the border and the Litani River. America and France will oversee the ceasefire along with a UN peacekeeping force. Thousands of Lebanese civilians have been returning to their homes in the south all day. But Israel has now declared a curfew, barring any more from doing so. It is afraid that Hezbollah could redeploy in the south by hiding among the civilians returning. Both sides are now counting the cost. Israel's campaign in Lebanon has been absolutely devastating, most of all in the south. As you can see here on the map, villages and towns across a huge area have been damaged from the south to Beirut and right up to the Bekaa Valley. The World Bank is estimating the economic impact of the war at almost £7 billion. As they return home, Lebanese civilians are finding massive destruction. This is what the people of the border town of Bint Jbeil have been going home to today. In the town of Alta al-Sha'ab, residents tore down an Israeli flag, which they found on their water tower. And some have returned to Israeli armour, still deployed on their streets, like this Israeli Merkava tank in the village of Khayyam. On the other side of the border, Israelis will want to go back to their homes too. 60,000 were evacuated from the north of Israel after October the 7th. They will want to be sure that Hezbollah attacks on the ground and in the air have stopped for good. And that will be one key test if the ceasefire has any chance of holding.
Well, let's speak now to Alex Rossi, who is in Jerusalem for us tonight. And Alex, we saw in your report the very different response to this ceasefire either side of the border.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think a lot of people don't really know what to make of it. It came in quite suddenly. It wasn't, for many people, really something that they were expecting at this moment in time. They also know that it is a 2-month ceasefire initially. It will last for 60 days. And there are no guarantees it will continue. It is pretty shaky, it is very delicate, and it is in its infancy. We saw those people returning in Lebanon. Both sides really are trying to cast themselves as the victors in all of this, but both sides have also lost an enormous amount as well. But there is good reason to think it will hold, certainly initially at least. As far as Hezbollah is concerned, it's been absolutely decimated. Much of its leadership has been eliminated, including its leader, Hassan Nasrallah. It will want to go away, lick its wounds and survive. And from the Israeli point of view as well, they don't want this war to continue. They want to replenish their stockpiles of weapons, rest their forces and concentrate on the threat from Iran as well. But the bigger picture of all of this is what is underpinning it, the architecture. It is effectively UN Resolution 1701, the same resolution that we saw in 2006 that failed. There is a slight difference. There is a monitoring committee led by the United States which will referee any breaches of the agreement, and Israel has made it absolutely clear as well, if there are any breaches, it reserves the right to attack aggressively, militarily, Hezbollah and restart the fighting. But the hope is, of course, that this will expand in time and lead to a bigger peace across the region.
Alex, live for us there in Jerusalem. Thank you. As Prime Minister, David Cameron voted against the last attempt in Parliament to legalise assisted dying. But tonight, in a significant intervention, he has come out in favour of the latest attempt. He did so despite his own personal experience with his late disabled son, Ivan, saying it will help bring a meaningful reduction in the suffering of the terminally ill. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Westminster tonight. And, John, a potentially influential change of heart, this from someone who previously held a different view.
This is a major boost for the supporters of Kim Leadbeater's assisted dying bill, which is being debated in the Commons on Friday. Yes, David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister in 2015, voted against a previous attempt to change the law. And yes, of course, he suffered that dreadful tragedy back in 2009 when he lost his son. Unlike Gordon Brown, who talked about losing his young daughter and is opposed to the bill, well, Mr Cameron is in favour and he has changed his mind. He says so in an article in The Times, in which he poses 4 questions. 1, will there be safeguards? Well, yes, he says, judges will have a role. 2, is it a slippery slope? A charge made by Labour's Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. Well, no, because it's only for the terminally ill. 3, what about the pressure on the NHS? He says, will only be a small number of cases. And 4, will it reduce suffering? Yes, he says. And in his article, Lord Cameron, as he now is, writes this: as campaigners have convincingly argued, this proposal is not about ending life, it's about shortening death. And he goes on to say, answering his question about the NHS, the NHS exists to serve patients and the public, not the other way round. And he says, when we know that there's no cure, when we know death is imminent, when patients enter a final and acute period of agony, then surely, if they can prevent it and crucially want to prevent it, we should let them make that choice. Well, this is a major boost for the Leadbeater campaign. It comes after 3 previous Prime Ministers, Conservative Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson, Theresa May and Liz Truss, all said they were opposed to it. He's in a minority of senior Tories who only a small minority are backing the bill. Who's going to win the bill? It's a free vote. The numbers in favour are slightly ahead, but there's still a lot of MPs who either haven't decided or are not saying.
John, updating us there from Westminster. Thank you. Now, the last time the data on migration into the UK was updated, the election campaign had just begun. The revelation that last year 685,000 more people entered the country than left it was one of the many headaches for the then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to deal with. Tomorrow, the latest migration numbers will be revealed, and even the new Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, admitted they are likely to be lower. But the number will still be large, and that could be a headache for the Labour government, as our political correspondent Ali Fortescue reports from Dover.
What's your number 1 political priority?
Immigration.
Dover is a place that's become symbolic in the debate about migration.
So calls to stop the boats that you'll hear a lot down here won't happen.
You got a couple of moments by any chance?
And for the new Labour MP here...
It's not politics, is it?
It is. I'm your local MP.
...who turned this seat red for the first time in 20 years, it's a subject that comes up again and again.
Just the man I want to talk to. Immigration.
Yes.
We need immigration, but not illegal immigration.
We're working hard, but it will take time, sir, and you will see an impact.
Yeah, I think you ought to make more of the deportations. Okay. I think you ought to make, certainly, I think that would appeal to people.
Are you totally confident that in this Parliament you'll be able to take out the smuggling gangs, that you'll be able to really change those numbers?
I genuinely think that working upstream with our international partners, combined with the Border Security Command and bringing in the security services, will have a massive impact on this.
In the next 5 years?
I'd say before the next general election we'll see some results.
There is a lot of focus on illegal migration. Last year, nearly 30,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats. That's obviously not insignificant, but it is a fraction of the overall net migration figure, which in recent years has been at record levels. Last year, it was just under 700,000. Most of those people, of course, coming here legally to work and to study. What do you expect we'll see from the figures?
The strong expectation is they'll go down. It's very difficult to see them not going down.
Is there a concern that comes with the numbers falling?
When you reduce net migration, you have to think about the effect on the UK as a whole, not just the effect on the immigration statistics. So, for example, if you reduce net migration by reducing the number of international students who are coming into Britain, you have to answer the question, how do universities break even? If you reduce net migration by reducing the number of workers who come into Britain, you have to answer the question, where are those? Who's going to fill those vacancies?
We've got activities and things going on.
He's talking about vacancies that people like Raj have to fill. You're very ready for Christmas here, it's good.
Oh, God, yeah, absolutely.
In places like Somerville Care Home. How has recent policy around immigration impacted your workforce?
The policy on change of bringing in dependents, I mean, it's been devastating, really, because what we've found is that the quality and calibre of person wanting to work in social care here has just, it's changed, completely changed. What we're now getting is people that want to come to the UK as opposed to those that want to work in social care. You know, you've got a migration minister that will sit there and has got to bring figures down, but they don't really care about how they do it.
And then they're ready for the tree next week.
The government have set out ways they want to upskill British workers. Numbers do matter, here and in places like Dover. Real success, though, beyond the headline figure, will be harder to judge. Ali Fortescue, Sky News.
It is just over 4 months now since Donald Trump was first targeted in an assassination attempt. But tonight it is members of his incoming administration who have been subject to threats, according to his team. The incidents ranged from bomb threats to so-called swatting, where a false crime is reported to force an armed police response. Let's find out more from our US correspondent James Matthews, who's in Washington tonight. So, James, what do we know about the nature of these threats and how serious they are?
They're being taken very seriously, and I can tell you that the FBI making that very clear tonight. The targets of these events, bomb threats, and as you say, swatting, which can lead to fatal consequences, given that you have somebody phoning emergency services. SWAT teams are sent to the address in question, guns drawn, of course, and often that can be a very distressing, possibly fatal for those involved. So very serious indeed. Among those who've been targeted, Elise Stefanik, Donald Trump's pick to be UN Secretary General. She was driving home to her Washington property and was told of a bomb threat. Matt Gaetz, Trump's pick to be Attorney General until he withdrew. He was told of a bomb threat at his property. Sniffer dogs and bomb squad were sent to investigate. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they've not been targeted in this latest episode. President Biden is being kept abreast of developments and indeed the investigation. But as I say, it's been taken very seriously indeed because of the state of American politics right now and, of course, the recent history in which we had 2 assassination attempts against the president-elect.
James, live there in Washington for us. Thank you. The government said today that it would review the sales targets for electric vehicles after Vauxhall's decision to close its van manufacturing plant in Luton. New petrol and diesel cars are currently due to be phased out in 2030, and companies increasingly penalised if they don't sell enough electric models. Our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
Shifting electric cars off showroom forecourts onto front drives has been a challenge for the motor trade, with public demand for emission-free driving falling behind targets set by government that ministers are now set to relax.
We will be shortly fast-tracking a consultation on our manifesto commitment to end the sales of new purely petrol and diesel cars by 2030. We want to do everything we can, together with industry, to secure further investment into the British automotive sector now and over the long term.
Vauxhall blamed its decision to end production at its Luton van plant on electric sales targets, underlining industry concerns. Petrol and diesel still account for 60% of new car sales, but their market share is falling. Battery electric and hybrids are all rising, with battery electric cars accounting for 18% of sales, an increase, but not enough to hit the 22% target, below which manufacturers could face fines.
Let's create the demand by incentivising with some sort of tax break, so it's not just the industry, which is currently spending about £2 billion this year alone trying to incentivise these vehicles to private consumers.
There's no shortage of different size models, different budgets.
For many potential buyers, going electric still feels like a risk. Auto Trader has 80 million visitors a month to its website, many curious but cautious about plugging in.
The main barriers to buying electric are the same barriers that exist to a degree for petrol and diesel. Cost, the outright cost of a new electric car is still on average 30% more expensive than its petrol counterpart. People are worried that the range and the public charging infrastructure isn't where they need it to be to make that switch. Mainly it's driven still by budget.
Successive governments have backed the conversion to electric cars, from battery investments and new models at Nissan in Sunderland to electric vans at Vauxhall's Ellesmere Port plant, and the now leader of the opposition welcoming electric minis in Oxford. The challenge for this government is persuading the public to keep up.
The government says it will review its targets by Christmas, but persuading private buyers of the undoubted virtues of electric cars will take longer. And this won't be the last time. They have to balance compulsion and incentives, the carrot and the stick for industry and consumers in the energy transition.
Many promise new jobs, and plenty of existing ones depend on getting it right. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Don't worry, Lucy, we have your back. The words which the former chief executive of the hospital where Lucy Letby murdered 7 babies admitted today he said to her during the investigation into deaths in the neonatal unit. Tony Chambers also relayed a meeting which involved the former nurse's parents, in which she said her father was very angry and threatening guns to my head. Our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter, reports now from Liverpool.
Out of everyone who worked at the Countess of Chester Hospital, Tony Chambers was the one at the top, the chief executive of an NHS trust where a nurse was attacking babies in the neonatal unit. Lucy Letby will never be released from prison after she was convicted of murdering and attempting to murder babies in her care. Mr. Chambers started his evidence with an apology to the families and was then asked about his culpability.
It's really, really difficult to answer that question. I suppose it's just that is the failure, that we just didn't see it. On reflection, the communications with the families could have and should have been better. As the accountable officer for the Trust, I must take some responsibility for that,
When senior consultants first raised their concerns about Lucy Letby in 2016, initial inquiries were inconclusive. 5 months later, Mr. Chambers met with the now suspended nurse. He praised her resilience under such scrutiny. Her parents, John and Susan, were in the room.
Letby's father was very angry. He was making threats. He was making threats that would have just made an already difficult situation even worse by threatening GMC referrals for the doctors. He's threatening guns to my head and all sorts of things.
Mr. Chambers admitted that the threats and aggression did affect some of his decision-making as he tried to placate the Letbys. In another meeting, he told their daughter, "Don't worry, Lucy, we've got your back." With hindsight, it was one of many regrets.
8 years on, with what we know, and we look at this, these are the kind of things that you know you didn't get right.
Mr. Chambers said, though, that he stood by his decisions, that he and his colleagues acted in good faith, but mistakes were made, and this inquiry will continue to interrogate them. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Liverpool.
Counter-terrorism police have raided a Kurdish community centre in London and have arrested 7 people as part of a probe into the banned Kurdistan Workers' Party. The Met says there's a significant probe investigation into potential terrorist activity, but added that it doesn't believe there's any imminent threat to the public. Now, of the many things you may know about Elon Musk, his belief that people in countries like Britain and America need to have more babies is unlikely to be top of the list. But to use the jargon, pro-natalist views shape everything from his opinion on whether the world has too many people, it doesn't, to his own attitude to having children, at least 11 at the last count. One man who has seen Elon Musk's views develop is his own father, Errol, and he spoke to our US correspondent, Martha Kellner.
Is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space.
Their alliance shaped the 2024 election, a bond that has only deepened since. But how can Elon Musk's views influence Donald Trump's policy? The cause closest to his heart is pro-natalism, a pro-birth ideology in which reproduction is the key goal of humanity. Musk has 11 children by 3 different women. Some have spent time with him at Trump's Florida mansion. But few understand the origin of his views better than his own father, Errol Musk.
Elon doesn't try to push his opinion across, but he will have an opinion.
Errol has 7 children himself, ranging in age from Elon at 53 to his youngest daughter, who is 5. He's also a pro-natalist.
We're not here to enjoy boating or flying or, skiing or kite surfing or something. We're here to continue being here.
Elon once told a biographer, if each successive generation of smart people has fewer kids, then that's probably bad. Is he talking about eugenics there?
I wouldn't call it eugenics as such, but every nation has practiced a certain form of survival of the fittest. One need only go to England and go to Cheltenham area, the horse breeding area, and say, look, we're not going to breed the horses anymore by any form of standard. I've got a few old horses I found in Nigeria, and we're going to just mix them with your racehorses. They'll say, no.
A more sanitised version of pro-family politics took centre stage on the campaign trail.
I consider myself to be the father of fertilisation.
The president-elect vowing to make in vitro fertilisation free to anyone who needs it.
So we restore our embryos, we store sperm and we store oocytes.
California is the world's fertility capital.
We are busy.
I'm invited into a leading IVF clinic in LA, where they're expecting a big boost in business. Patients at this clinic can choose not only the gender of their baby, but their eye colour too. It's Silicon Valley meets family planning.
How big a part is Elon Musk going to play in the future of IVF?
Musk is a technocrat. He's an intellectual genius in multiple areas, and everything he touches seems to turn to gold. There's not much that evolves as quickly as Musk's technology, but IVF has done that, and I think he's going to find that very attractive.
Musk has invested millions in fertility research, but he's navigating his own complicated family life. In the hills outside Austin, Texas, there are rumours he's bought a compound to house some of his children and their mothers together. Musk denies this is true, but soon he could be helping to design family policy across this country. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Los Angeles.
3 British teams were in Champions League action tonight, and it was a famous night at Anfield where Liverpool beat Real Madrid 2-0. Goals from Alexis McAllister and substitute Cody Gakpo saw Liverpool make it 5 wins from 5. Both Kylian Mbappe and Mo Salah failed to score from the penalty spot. Elsewhere, there was late drama at Villa Park as Aston Villa were denied a dramatic winner. Morgan Rogers had the ball in the back of the net, but VAR denied Unai Emery and his players a win after Diego Carlos was judged to have committed a foul. Celtic, meanwhile, drew 1-1 at home to Club Brugge. They came from behind to take a point. Dyson Maeda with the goal in the second half. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. You were tuned into all of that, weren't you? Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Welcome to both. And among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front of the Telegraph. Its headline for tomorrow's paper, Badenoch, the Tories failed on migration. That, of course, and plenty more in just a moment.